Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are an entrepreneur, a business manager, or a founder looking for your next strategic advantage, you have absolutely found your way to the right place.
You really have. We are so glad you're joining us at the table today.
Because today, our mission is to fundamentally rewire how you view aging. We're looking at what is undeniably the single largest, fastest growing, and most deeply misunderstood market in the world.
The longevity economy.
Exactly. For way too long, the business world has treated older populations as a burden, or a charitable cause, or just a problem to be managed.
Which is a massive strategic error.
It is. We are going to tear that assumption down today and show you the staggering opportunity this demographic actually represents. To do this, we are pulling from two incredibly powerful sources. First, we are diving into the work of Joseph Coughlin.
Right.
And we'll be focusing heavily on his research into the microeconomics, the product design, and the actual consumer behavior of older adults.
And to anchor all of those consumer insights in the broader reality, I will be bringing in the macroeconomic landscape. We're using Andrew Scott's research for this, specifically looking at his recent paper in The Lancet.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. It details the profound impacts of healthy longevity on the global workforce, aggregate GDP, and international economic policy.
And when you put Coughlin's consumer insights right next to Scott's macroeconomic data, a really striking reality emerges.
A total paradigm shift.
Yes, because you constantly hear the aging population described in the media as a ticking time bomb.
You hear it all the time.
But the data tells a completely different story. If we just look at the United States alone, this is an $8 trillion opportunity.
8 trillion.
But capturing that value requires a massive strategic pivot. If you're a business leader, you cannot simply market medicalized institutional products and expect to tap into that wealth.
No, you absolutely can't. You have to understand the macroeconomic transition toward multi-stage productivity and how that translates into what we call transcendent aspirational design.
That $8 trillion figure, that should make any founder stop in their tracks. But to understand why the vast majority of businesses are getting this so incredibly wrong right now, we really have to look at the origin of our flawed view of aging.
Which goes back a lot further than people think.
It does. Coughlin makes this brilliant historical point. Old age, in the way society currently treats it, is essentially a 19th century invention.
It's a social construct.
Completely. If we go back to the Victorian era, the medical community operated on a very specific and entirely false concept called the vital energy theory.
The vital energy theory?
Yes. Doctors literally believed that every human being was born with a finite, unreplenishable tank of vital energy.
Like a battery that you just can't recharge.
Exactly like that. And every time you did something, especially strenuous, productive, or even just fun things, you drained a little bit of that tank.
So you were just slowly running out of fuel.
Right. So when people reached a certain age and naturally showed signs of slowing down, the medical consensus was that their battery was flashing red.
And the treatment for that was what?
The only prescribed treatment was to completely withdraw from society. Stop working, stop engaging, and simply rest so you didn't die instantly.
Which is just a remarkable historical anchor, because that fundamental medical misunderstanding ended up shaping the macroeconomic structures that we still live with today.
How so?
Well, as society industrialized and moved away from those agrarian family structures, those who could no longer work, or were simply told by doctors that they shouldn't work, were often sent to almshouses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And originally, the almshouse was a catch-all for the poor of all ages. But as specialized institutions started being built for orphans or the blind, the almshouses essentially became the default repository for older adults.
So they were just separated from the rest of the world.
Completely. And that system cemented a cultural and economic narrative that older people were fundamentally a dependent class. They were viewed as a problem to be housed, not a resource to be utilized.
That makes so much sense.
And today, if you look at modern economics, that 19th century bias manifests through the fear of the old age dependency ratio, the OADR.
I want to pause you right there, because the OADR comes up in almost every gloomy economic forecast I read.
Oh, it's everywhere.
For the founders and managers listening who might be making long-term strategic plans based on this, can you explain exactly how the OADR is calculated and why it historically terrifies economists?
Absolutely. So the old age dependency ratio is a very simple mathematical formula. It takes the number of people over the age of 65 and divides it by the working age population, which is defined as people between 15 and 64.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. But the economic terror comes from the assumption that a shrinking base of young workers simply cannot generate enough tax revenue, or GDP, to support a massive, non-working, dependent, older population.
It paints a picture of total structural collapse.
Exactly. But Andrew Scott's research completely dismantles this ticking time bomb narrative because the traditional OADR is fatally flawed.
Why is that?
It assumes that the exact moment you turn 65, you immediately become economically inactive and a massive drain on health resources. It completely ignores the reality of health span extension.
People aren't just living longer.
No, they're living healthier for much longer. Scott's data shows that because of this extended health span, the demographic shift is actually a massive economic positive.
A positive.
Yes, it yields what he calls a longevity dividend. But that only happens if we update our labor and economic policies to reflect the reality that a 65-year-old today has the physiological and economic capacity of someone decades younger in the past.
Hearing you lay out how that macroeconomic fear is based on outdated data, it perfectly mirrors what we see in consumer spending.
I imagine the parallels are huge.
They are. When you look at the true market size today, the reality is just undeniable. This older demographic is not a monolithic group of frail patients sitting in a room waiting for care.
None at all.
In the U.S., consumers over 50 control 83% of household wealth. They account for nearly half of the entire GDP.
Half the GDP.
Yes, we're talking about the baby boomers. This is a generation that has shaped, disrupted, and dominated every single market they have ever passed through. From the creation of modern youth culture, to the explosion of the suburbs, to the rise of the SUV.
They've always driven the market.
Always. They are an active, incredibly wealthy consumer base. And they're refusing to age the way their parents did. Yet historically, businesses have treated them with this bizarre binary.
What do you mean?
They're either seen as needy, requiring heavy medical intervention, or they're seen as greedy, spending all their time on golf courses, hoarding wealth.
That false dichotomy is precisely why business leaders need to transition their strategic thinking right now. In macroeconomic terms, we have to aggressively move beyond what policymakers and marketers call the silver economy.
The silver economy.
Right. And the silver economy model is an absolute trap for businesses. It mistakenly treats everyone over the age of 50 as a single homogeneous market segment.
Which is ridiculous if you think about it.
It really is. It assumes that crossing the threshold of 50 suddenly gives you the exact same consumer profile, the same desires, and the same physical needs as someone who is 85.
That's a 35-year age gap.
Exactly. And this intellectual laziness leads companies to segment older demographics solely to sell them products that manage decline. Things like adult diapers, specialized medical aids, or walk-in tubs.
Right, which are important, but...
They are necessary, and those markets do exist.
Yeah.
But they do not drive broader economic growth or capture the immense wealth you just described. Instead, Scott's research advocates for a shift to the evergreen economy.
The evergreen economy. I love that framing. It feels vastly more aspirational.
It is.
How does that actually translate into actionable economic policy for the people listening?
The evergreen economy is fundamentally about investing in health, education, and productivity across the entirety of the life course. It is the macroeconomic realization that if 50 is the new 40, you do not need to create a brand new, patronizing senior market for 50-year-olds.
So what do you do instead?
You expand your existing markets to include older demographics. The most valuable products, services, and policies in an evergreen economy are not designed to manage physical decline. They are designed to support healthy, productive, and longer lives for people at all ages.
That represents a foundational shift in how we view human capital.
It changes everything about human capital.
But looking at this from a founder's or a manager's perspective, if you are running a company, having people never retire sounds like a massive payroll bottleneck.
That is a very real concern.
How does Scott suggest companies actually manage the cost of an aging workforce without completely stalling the promotion tracks for the 25-year-olds coming in?
That is the critical friction point for any manager right now. You see, a longer life demands a longer working career, which means the absolute end of the traditional three-stage life.
The learn, earn, retire model.
Precisely. For a century, our macroeconomic model was simple. You learn in your youth, you earn in your adulthood, and then you retire. But you cannot finance a 30-year retirement on a 40-year career. It's just mathematically impossible.
Right.
So Scott introduces the concept of the multi-stage career. Retaining older, experienced workers is no longer just a nice HR initiative. It is a vital necessity for your company's intellectual capital and for overall GDP growth, especially as birth rates decline globally.
So how do we fix the bottleneck?
The solution is moving away from the corporate ladder and toward a corporate lattice.
A lattice.
Yes. It involves building pathways for delayed starts, adult education, sabbaticals, and flexible career transitions.
So it's not just a straight line up anymore.
Exactly. It means a 68-year-old might transition out of a high-stress executive role and step into a part-time mentorship position.
Oh, I see.
That frees up the promotion track for the 25-year-old while the company retains the elder's institutional knowledge. The hard stop at age 65 is an arbitrary artifact of the past.
That makes total sense.
Companies that fail to integrate intergenerational teams, where a 70-year-old and a 30-year-old are collaborating on equal footing, they are going to bleed intellectual capital to their competitors.
The way you describe integrating older adults back into the core of the workforce, that is a perfect mirror for how businesses need to design products for this demographic.
How so?
Because when companies operate on that outdated vital energy myth, when they assume older adults are just winding down and withdrawing, they produce spectacular, embarrassing failures.
I can only imagine.
Coughlin's research highlights some of the most disastrous product flops in corporate history, and they all stem from a complete failure of empathy.
Do you have an example?
Think about Heinz Senior Foods in the 1950s. Older adults who had dental issues or trouble chewing were buying Gerber baby food.
Right, for the texture.
Yes. So Heinz executives looked at the data and thought, brilliant. Let's make a line of pureed food specifically branded for seniors.
Which completely ignores the psychological component of the purchase.
Completely ignores it. It failed miserably.
Why did it fail so fast?
Because an older adult buying baby food can always pretend they are buying it for a grandchild. But putting a jar explicitly labeled senior food on the checkout counter, that forces them to publicly announce their frailty to the cashier and to everyone in line.
Wow, yes, that is a massive branding disaster.
Or consider the Katharina das Große phone from Germany. This is a cell phone designed with giant rubberized buttons. It was so big and heavy it barely fit in the pocket.
Oh no.
It functioned perfectly as a communication device for someone with vision or dexterity issues, but nobody bought it.
Because of the stigma.
Exactly. Can you imagine pulling out a phone the size of a brick at a dinner party? It functioned perfectly, but pulling it out essentially broadcasted to the room, look at me, I am disabled. And of course, the classic American example, the emergency medical pendants with the infamous, I've fallen and I can't get up marketing.
Everyone remembers those commercials.
Yes, they provide safety, but they are heavily stigmatizing. They define the user strictly by their ultimate vulnerability.
The irony there is palpable. When you design a policy at the macro level or a product at the micro level exclusively around managing decline, you actively alienate the very people you are trying to serve.
You miss their humanity entirely.
You miss their aspiration. So how does a modern business avoid the Heinz senior food trap? What is the actual framework for designing for this demographic successfully?
You use what Coughlin calls transcendent design. And for anyone building a product right now, listen closely because this is the blueprint.
Transcendent design?
Yes. Transcendent design is universal design dialed up to 11.
How does it differ from just universal design?
Universal design is about making things accessible, like putting a lever handle on a door instead of a round knob. That helps someone with arthritis, but it also helps you when you're carrying 3 bags of groceries.
Right. It's just practical.
But transcendent design goes a step further. It creates products that are highly accessible for older adults, but they are so beautiful, so intuitive, and so aspirational that absolutely everyone wants them, regardless of their age. It is not just about utility, it is about desire.
So it bridges the gap between functionality and social signaling.
Yes, and the perfect story for this is the OXO Good Grips potato peeler.
Oh, I know that peeler.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
In the late 1980s, Betsy Farber loved to cook, but she had severe arthritis in her wrists. She was struggling to use that traditional, narrow, painful metal vegetable peeler we all grew up with.
Ones that just dig into your hand.
Exactly. Her husband, Sam Farber, saw her frustration and realized the design was the problem, not her hands. He teamed up with an industrial designer named Patty Moore.
Patty Moore is brilliant.
She is a legend in design circles because she spent years traveling the world in an empathy suit. She'd literally taped her fingers to restrict movement, wore heavy glasses that blurred her vision, and used earplugs to truly physically understand the daily friction of aging.
That level of dedication is incredible.
Using that intense empathetic research, they designed a peeler with a large, oval, soft, rubberized handle that wouldn't slip and required very little grip strength. It solved a very specific accessibility problem for arthritis.
But it didn't look like a medical device.
Not at all. The design was so incredibly good and so comfortable that it completely transcended its category. Today, almost every kitchen has an OXO peeler. It became a staple for 20-somethings and 80-somethings alike. That is transcendent design.
That's a perfect example.
And if you want the ultimate modern example, look at the smartphone you are probably holding right now.
The iPhone.
Yes. The iPhone offers incredible accessibility features. You can magnify text, you can use voice commands if you have hand tremors, the flash goes off for hearing loss. But it does all of this invisibly, without infantilizing the user. It connects them to the world, and it is a pure status symbol.
The smartphone example illustrates perfectly how technology can bridge the gap between the silver economy and the evergreen economy. By creating a product that serves the entire life course, you capture the immense spending power of the older demographic without isolating them into a stigmatized, walled-off submarket.
Exactly.
But this brings up a massive strategic challenge for the founders listening. How do you actually uncover these insights today? You can't just put your entire product team in empathy suits.
Right.
How do you know what this market truly needs before it becomes obvious to your competitors?
To find those insights, you have to look for your lead users. And in the longevity economy, the ultimate lead user is overwhelmingly the older woman.
The older woman?
Yes. Coughlin's data on this is striking and undeniable. Women influence 64% of all global consumer purchases.
That is massive.
And they live longer than men, meaning the older demographic gets, the more heavily female it becomes. And crucially, women provide the vast majority of informal elder care for their spouses, their parents, and their communities.
They are managing the logistics of aging every single day.
They are intimately, daily acquainted with the friction points of aging because they are the ones handling them. If you are building a product, a service, or an app for this space, you do not start by interviewing a 22-year-old tech developer. You go find a 75-year-old woman.
Because she possesses an unparalleled frontline understanding of the market's true demands. She is not blinded by the traditional male-dominated corporate assumptions about what retirement is supposed to look like.
Precisely. Older women deeply understand the job to be done.
The core utility.
Right. In business strategy, the job to be done is the real underlying reason a consumer hires a product. For older adults, the job to be done is rarely just manage my physical disability. It is almost always about preserving dignity, maintaining independence, and pursuing joy.
It's about living a full life.
When you observe these female lead users, you see them innovating and hacking existing products to meet these real needs. Look at Marcy Rogo.
What does she do?
She spent time in retirement communities and realized a massive gap in the market. Older adults didn't want a medicalized isolation abatement program run by a social worker.
Of course not.
They wanted the normalcy of a dating site. They wanted romance, travel companions, and friendship on their own terms. So she founded Stitch, a platform that treats them like vibrant adults.
That is brilliant.
Or look at Sally Lindover, a woman who completely hacked the modern sharing economy. Instead of moving into an assisted living facility, which bundles a bunch of expensive medical services she didn't want and strips away her independence, she used Instacart to get her groceries delivered. And she used Airbnb to rent out a room to generate income and meet new people.
That is incredible.
She essentially unbundled assisted living by using tech platforms designed by and for millennials.
That is the absolute definition of a lead user innovator. And from a macroeconomic perspective, this is exactly where the massive disruption is going to happen.
You see it playing out at scale.
Yes. When a demographic uses existing consumer technology to bypass traditional, highly expensive institutional care models, they are signaling a tectonic market shift.
A total shift in capital.
They're redirecting capital away from legacy healthcare real estate and toward flexible, consumer-driven digital platforms. If your company can identify these hacking behaviors early and formalize them into products, you can capture the exponential growth of the evergreen economy.
So bringing all of this together, what does this actually mean for you, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the founder listening right now?
It's time to act.
The playbook is clear. If you are designing products, services, or workplace policies based on the 19th century assumption that aging is simply a process of decline, you are actively missing the biggest, wealthiest market in the world.
You're leaving trillions on the table.
You have to design for aspiration. You have to update your HR policies to support multi-stage productivity in intergenerational teams. And you have to utilize transcendent design to create solutions that people actually desire, not just things they are forced to use because their vital energy is running low.
And from a strategic and macroeconomic standpoint, you must recognize that human capital, intellectual value, and market growth no longer end at the arbitrary age of 65. The businesses that thrive in the coming decades will be those that integrate older adults not just as a wealthy consumer base, but as essential active contributors to economic vitality.
We highly encourage you to seek out the complete works of both Joseph Coughlin and Andrew Scott.
Their research provides the detailed empirical blueprints you need to integrate these strategies deeply into your own business models.
And we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you look at your own company's roadmap. As technology continues to grant us more years of safety, health, and autonomy, the overlap between consumer and producer flows both ways.
It always comes back around.
The products you design, the workplace policies you implement, and the cultural narratives you choose to build today as a business leader are exactly what you will be forced to consume tomorrow as an aging adult. So ask yourself, what kind of old age are you building for yourself?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We look forward to having you with us for the next deep dive. See you then.